They say déjà vu is just a glitch in the brain, a misfiring of neurons. But what if it's something more? What if it's a warning? A sign that reality isn't what it seems? I boarded the ship to escape, to find clarity. Instead, I found a world where truth is manipulated, love is weaponized, and the line between sanity and madness blurs. My name is Jasmine Waters, and this is the story of how I uncovered the mind-bending truth about déjà vu, the matrix, and the darkness that lurks beneath the surface. If you think you've heard it all, you haven't. Hit follow on your favorite platform now, because the next story might just change the way you see everything. Don't miss a single twisted turn. They say the ocean doesn't keep secrets. But on the night I boarded the Astralucent, the water looked like glass, flawless, deceptive, a perfect mirror. I stepped onto the gangway with one suitcase, and a soul I didn't recognize anymore. I'd booked this cruise in a moment of weakness, or maybe clarity. After everything that happened back home, after the him of it all, I needed to disappear. No therapy, no closure. Just distance. Open sky. False names if necessary. I told myself I was chasing clarity, but in hindsight, I was just drifting toward whatever felt like control. From the moment I boarded, something felt off. Not wrong, just engineered. The smiles were too wide. The service too smooth. The other passengers moved like they were following invisible choreography. The first night's welcome party was held on the upper deck beneath a sky so perfectly starlit, it felt programmed. I half expected the constellations to spell out a warning. I was sipping a blood orange spritz, mind racing, when I noticed him. Tall, barefoot, white linen shirt, skin bronzed and weathered in a way that looked curated. He was surrounded, of course, laughing guests hanging on his every word like he was some reincarnated prophet. I couldn't hear what he was saying over the steel pan quartet, but the rhythm of his body language said everything. Power without effort. I didn't want to care, but I watched him for too long. And then he turned, looked at me, straight through me. It wasn't the kind of look that says, I see you. It was the kind that says, I've already seen you. You just forgot. Déjà vu. Not the fleeting kind you brush off, but the visceral kind, like your body remembers something your mind's too scared to retrieve. I felt it in my spine. A vibration. A crack in the script of reality. He raised his glass toward me, smiled, and just like that, I was pulled in. He introduced himself the next day. Elias. I run workshops. Psychological recalibration, leadership elevation, post-capitalist truth realignment. It sounded like a parody of every Silicon Valley cult ever. But he said it with such casual conviction that I laughed anyway. We met for coffee in the ship's botanical solarium. Yes, the cruise ship had a solarium, and the conversation flowed like we'd known each other in another life. He was the kind of man who makes you forget the last man's betrayal. Dangerous. He told me I was vibrationally sensitive. That people like me are usually drawn to the void before they even know what it is. I said that sounded like a line. He smiled and didn't deny it. By day 3, he'd invited me to a private gathering held below deck, off the passenger manifest. The room wasn't on any map, and the hallway to it smelled like warm copper and cologne. That was the first time I met the group. They weren't what I expected. Not robes and incense. More designer linens and curated playlists. They spoke in phrases that sounded motivational at first, until you realized they didn't actually mean anything. Leadership is letting go of consequence. Your future isn't written in code. It's compiled in energy. Truth is frictionless when you're aligned. I should have run, but I stayed. Not because I believed them, because I didn't. I stayed because Elias kept looking at me like I wasn't broken, like he saw some deeper signal beneath the noise. And for someone who'd just been emotionally obliterated by a man who siphoned off my money, my love, my identity, attention from someone that magnetic feels like gravity. The erotic tension started subtly. His fingers brushing mine during a group exercise on surrender mechanics. A whispered comment during a guided memory cleanse. Your instincts are your last honest currency. By day 5, he'd slipped a red string bracelet onto my wrist. To remind you who you were before they told you who to be. And just like that, I was no longer a guest. I was a disciple, voluntarily blindfolded, subtly gaslit, floating in a matrix where love was the currency, and loyalty was enforced by guilt masquerading as awakening. I didn't know then that the bracelet marked me, that the woman I used to be was already drowning. But I did know one thing. That night, standing on the top deck as the ship split the water beneath a perfect moon, I felt it again, déjà vu. Only this time, it wasn't a memory glitch. It was a warning. Something was coming. And I was the only one awake enough to feel it. They called it the circle. No one explained why. No one had to. The name hung in the air like incense, mystical, vague, and binding. Once you were invited, you didn't leave. Not because you were chained, but because you were seen. That was the trap. They made you feel seen. It started with morning rituals. Nothing invasive, just breathwork and body language alignment sessions at sunrise. Everyone wore white, bare feet on warm deckwood, eyes closed, palms open. The body never lies, Elias said, his voice floating above us like a spell. Only your story does. It made sense in the moment. Everything did. That's how it works. You strip away context. You repeat poetic half-truths enough times, and they start to taste like wisdom. And when you're surrounded by people nodding in synchrony, you nod too. That's how groupthink wears you down. It doesn't yell. It whispers what you already want to believe. The other members were beautiful. Calm. Euphoric, even. Each one of them seemed to be healing from some trauma they never named. There was Lydia, a former architect who said blueprints were colonial imprints of the mind. Or Jaden, who used to work in investment banking but now engineered emotional currency. That one made me laugh. He didn't. They welcomed me with this practiced warmth, curated empathy. Everyone offered support, but no one asked questions. No past. No pain. Just now. Now was everything. By day 6, I had a badge. It was a small golden pin in the shape of a sideways infinity loop. The flow, they called it. A symbol of detachment. Freedom from causality. You're no longer bound to the script of consequence, Elias told me as he pinned it to my dress. You're aligned now. It should have made me feel uneasy, but all I felt was acceptance. Like after years of proving, bending, shrinking myself down to be palatable for some man's ego, I had found a space where I didn't have to fight to be heard. What I didn't see was that I was no longer being heard. I was being rewritten. The erotic energy between Elias and me had evolved. It was no longer flirtation. It was ideological foreplay. His eyes stayed on me during truth extraction sessions. His voice lingered longer in the shared silences we weren't supposed to acknowledge. He began tailoring the group teachings to include parables that mirrored my traumas, without ever mentioning me by name. It was emotional stalking disguised as spiritual mentorship, and I devoured every word. One night, he invited me to the captain's private dining lounge, off-menu unlisted. The entire space had been transformed. Dark velvet drapes, candlelight flickering against ocean glass, music playing at a frequency so low it felt like a heartbeat in my ribs. He poured 2 glasses of an amber liquor I didn't recognize. To the illusion of free will, he said, clinking his glass against mine, and the courage it takes to pretend we ever had it. I should have asked questions. Instead, I sipped. Instead, I leaned in. Instead, I let him place one hand gently on my throat, not enough to hurt, just enough to remind me who was in control. Later that night, back in my cabin, I stared into the mirror and touched the red string on my wrist. For a second, my reflection smiled before I did. Déjà vu. No, worse. A fracture. A flicker in the script. I whispered out loud, "Who is writing this?" And the room fell quiet like it had been listening all along. In the days that followed, things got stranger. Jaden stopped speaking in metaphors and started slipping me numbers. Bank account details. Offshore routing codes. "Just in case," he whispered once, eyes darting toward the surveillance dome in the hallway ceiling. I didn't even know we were being watched, but he seemed to think we always were. And Lydia, always so calm, had a panic attack during breathwork and was removed. Not consoled, not cared for, just quietly erased. No mention of her the next day. Just a folded white robe left on a lounge chair by the infinity pool. Groupthink didn't just bind, it cleansed. And through it all, Elias became warmer in tone, colder in motive. He'd hold my hand with one sentence, and dismantle my entire moral framework with the next. "Ethics," he said one night, "are just gravity dressed up as morality. You can only defy them once you understand they were designed to keep you small." I laughed. He didn't. He never did when it mattered. By the end of the week, I had lost track of time. I stopped checking my phone. I stopped thinking in hours. I measured my days by Elias' attention and the group's approval. The past was a fog. The future was a shared dream. And yet, every time I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in a porthole or a wine glass, it felt like someone else was blinking back. Not me. Not yet. But someone. They say memory is unreliable. But what they don't say is how seductively unreliable it becomes when someone else starts curating your reality for you. By the third week on the Astralucent, the world no longer felt like it belonged to me. Conversations I swore I'd had, others swore never happened. Faces I saw vanish in moments. And the déjà vu? It no longer came in flickers. It lingered. The whispers started late at night, just after the ship's official announcements stopped. At first, I thought they were dreams. But one night, I left the balcony door open. At 2:11 a.m., I heard it clearly. "You're not where you think you are." A woman's voice. Soft. Almost automated. I bolted upright, heart slamming in my ribs. I turned on all the lights, checked my room. Nothing. But on the bathroom mirror, a smudge. Circular. Like someone had drawn an infinity loop with the pad of their thumb. I wiped it off. The next morning, it was back. I tried to ask Jaden if he heard anything strange at night. His smile didn't even falter. "The truth has its own frequency," he said. "You only pick it up when you're aligned." It wasn't an answer. It was a sedative, one I'd swallowed too many times. That afternoon, I snuck into the lower deck lounge, a members-only space where Elias hosted leadership acceleration sessions. I wasn't supposed to be there without an invite, but I'd seen Elias enter alone earlier, and I knew the panel code from a reflection I'd memorized in the mirror behind the bar 2 nights ago. Inside, dim lights. Massive LED screens looping quote fragments. Free thought is the final illusion. Emotion is the most powerful tool of compliance. At the center of the room stood a terminal. One screen. One keyboard. One file folder open. Guest transfers phase ledger 3x. It looked like a spreadsheet, but the amounts were too specific. The names were aliases. Clarity Wave, Soft Father, Solar Serpent. I didn't need to be a forensic accountant to know what this was. Money laundering. Offshore accounts. Phantom payments disguised as spiritual donations. My stomach turned. My breath went tight. And then I heard his voice behind me. "Low. Calm. Close. You came early." Elias stepped into the low amber light like a dream you can't wake from. Barefoot. Button-down open. Completely unreadable. I should have screamed. Should have run. But I stood there frozen. He looked at the screen. Then back at me. "The thing about truth," he said, "is it doesn't matter nearly as much as permission. If I offer the experience you crave, why would you care how it's funded?" I didn't have an answer. My mind was racing, splintering under the weight of competing realities. And then he reached forward and pressed a button on the terminal. The screen went black. "Let's not confuse curiosity with rebellion," he said, stepping close. "You're too valuable to lose to doubt." He cupped my chin. Soft. Reassuring. But his thumb pressed just a bit too hard. That night, I cried in the shower. Not because I was afraid, because I didn't know whether to be. Later that week, I was called into a resonance check. It was something new, an audio recalibration session using tones Elias said could help align my energetic footprint. I lay on a velvet couch in a soundproof room. Sub-bass frequencies pulsed under my skin. A voice, not Elias but eerily similar, spoke in loops between tones. "You are seen. You are chosen. You are safe. Do not betray your alignment." For 28 minutes, I couldn't move. At minute 29, I cried involuntarily. Not from emotion, from programming. They called it audio manipulation therapy. I called it something else, psychological warfare. The following night, I returned to my cabin and found a note under my pillow. Handwritten. No envelope. "Your memories are being re-encoded. Stop trusting your reflections. L. Lydia." She wasn't gone. She was hiding. That was the first time I truly began to believe I wasn't crazy. That my paranoia was proof of clarity, not its breakdown. The question was, how much damage had already been done? Had they rewritten parts of me I couldn't recover? Was I remembering things that never happened, or forgetting things that did? And the déjà vu? It had become suffocating. Every corridor I walked down felt lived. Every conversation pre-scripted. Even my own thoughts felt curated. And then one night, I woke to the sound of my own voice, playing from my cabin speaker. "You're too valuable to lose to doubt." The exact words Elias said. But in my voice, I slammed the speaker off, checked every device. Nothing was synced. The system had no record of a recording. I stared into the mirror. And this time, I didn't wait for the reflection to move. I just whispered, "I know what you are." And it whispered back, "Then run." There's a moment in every manipulation where love becomes currency, where affection becomes leverage, where touch stops feeling intimate, and starts feeling like a contract you didn't realize you signed. That moment happened between Elias and me, somewhere between a glass of Madeira wine and his lips against my neck. It was formal night on the Astra Lucent, black ties, silver gowns, the scent of money and illusion stitched into every thread. The entire upper deck had been transformed into a faux ballroom under the stars. Chandeliers had been flown in, real ones, from Paris supposedly, because on this ship, nothing was ever enough. Even luxury had to be performative. I wore a backless midnight blue dress I'd never packed. It appeared in my wardrobe earlier that day with a note. "You are a mirror worth reflecting." I should have been repulsed. Instead, I slipped it on like second skin. When Elias saw me, he didn't speak. He just extended his hand and led me to the upper deck's edge, where the party faded into quiet. He poured us both wine and said nothing for 5 long minutes. Then, "Do you believe in duality? Is this another test?" I asked. "No," he said, "this is seduction." He leaned in. His voice brushed against the shell of my ear like silk dipped in warning. To manipulate a person's mind, you must first touch their emotional frequency. That requires intimacy. Consent isn't a document, it's an energy. One I've been reading in you since the moment you boarded this ship. My breath caught. He was outlining the game, and I was still playing. He traced one finger down my spine. My skin betrayed me. I arched, not from pleasure, but from recognition. Not of him, of the pattern. Because this is how they do it, isn't it? Con artists, narcissists, charismatic leaders. They don't take your trust all at once. They slowly replace your instincts with theirs. Bit by bit, touch by touch, word by word, until your heartbeat isn't yours anymore. We slept together that night. If you can call it that. There was no tenderness, no exploration. Just a choreography of control. He undressed me with ceremony. Never rushed. Never tender. Every move calculated to imprint. To burn himself into memory. The kind of sex that doesn't live in the body, it lives in the psyche. He whispered affirmations against my skin. "You're not weak. You're awake. Your pain was permission for rebirth. You were programmed to resist freedom." I didn't say anything. I just let it happen. Afterwards, he kissed my forehead and whispered, "You're aligned now. There's no going back." The next morning, everything had changed. Not in the world, in me. I couldn't hear my own thoughts without replaying his voice. I started defending his choices when I was alone. Started repeating phrases like transcend judgment, and alignment is clarity. I was gaslighting myself, which, as it turns out, is the final stage of manipulation. When the abuser doesn't need to lie to you anymore. Because now, you lie to yourself. And then came the promotion ceremony. Elias announced to the circle that I had elevated, that I would now be overseeing resonance recalibrations for new inductees. "Leadership is stewardship," he said. "She's ready." The group clapped, smiling, euphoric. Jaden avoided my eyes. Lydia was still missing. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Inside, I was fracturing. They gave me a room on the top deck. Private suite. Ocean view. Silk robes. And a company laptop. Inside it, encrypted logs. Names. Account IDs. Alignments. They weren't healing people. They were profiling them. Bank data. Psychological scores. Emotional pain points ranked from 1 to 5. I saw my name. Score 4.7. Classification. Trauma loyal. Responsive to spiritual authority. High susceptibility to erotic imprinting. I gagged. Slammed the laptop shut. My entire personality had been engineered as a pipeline for conversion and capital. That night, I confronted Elias. We met on the starboard deck, where the sea and sky were indistinguishable. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply asked, "Did you ever care?" He looked at me like I'd asked whether light exists in darkness. "Does it matter?" he said. "You're already more than you were. That's the only truth that counts." "So you used me?" "I aligned you." I slapped him. He didn't flinch. He just smiled. "Pain is the final teacher. You're almost ready." That's when I knew. This wasn't a cult. This was a network. A global lattice of charismatic predators laundering money, rewriting minds, and wrapping it all in the language of light. And I had become one of their tools. Unless I broke the script. You don't wake up from manipulation like a dream. You claw your way out. Nail by nail. Memory by memory. And even then, the scars speak before you do. After the confrontation with Elias, I spent 3 days pretending. Pretending I was still aligned. Pretending I was still grateful. Pretending I hadn't tasted the poison behind his kiss. That's what survivors do, right? We learn to perform belief until it's safe to stop. But inside me, something had snapped. Quietly. Permanently. I began my rebellion not with a scream, but with a password. The circle's internal database was protected, multi-authenticated, biometric locked, and firewalled into oblivion. But I had access now. They'd made me a steward of the system, and they never expected one of their tools to bite the hand that programmed it. I began at night, when the ship was quiet and Elias was usually in resonance sessions with new recruits. Sessions I now knew were nothing more than emotional extractions. Psychological mining disguised as healing. Using the laptop they assigned me, I located the secondary matrix directory. It wasn't on the main dashboard. You had to speak the words shadow alignment into the voice interface. And just like that, it unlocked. Inside, hundreds of influencer dossiers. Men and women who had once attended the circle's retreats, now installed in places of power. Corporate advisors, self-help authors, wellness podcast hosts, even a few clinical psychologists. Their bios weren't just profiles. They were conversion logs, psychological blueprints, and each contained an offshore account routing ledger with deposits categorized as impact residuals. In plain English, these weren't just spiritual retreats. They were breeding grounds for controlled influence and laundering operations. Elias and his circle were playing a game far bigger than spiritual alignment. They were engineering thought leaders, scripting belief systems, and converting pain into profit. I wanted to run, but I needed proof. So I started downloading, piece by encrypted piece. I stored the files in a hidden volume within a music folder labeled Mantra Sound Loops, version 3. They'd never look there. Every night I transferred another portion. Every morning I wore white and smiled, and let them believe I was still theirs. But paranoia is a slow poison. I started noticing subtle shifts. Jaden wouldn't meet my eye. Elias grew more affectionate in public, touching my back, brushing my hair from my face. I used to feel chosen. Now I felt displayed, like a trophy kept close before it cracks. The circle's morning rituals began to include truth attunement scans, silent retinal reads during meditation, collecting micro-emotional data. I kept failing them. Then one evening, as the ship passed through international waters, I received a note. Slipped under my pillow again. Same handwriting as before. Lydia, you've opened the right door. But not the last one. Meet me in Deck B storage. Midnight. Don't tell anyone. Don't look scared. I folded the note into my bra and smiled through dinner like I wasn't breaking protocol with every heartbeat. At 11:58 p.m., I crept down the spiral stairwell. Deck B was mostly unused, cargo, maintenance, disrepair. The hallway smelled of rust and damp sea metal. When I found the storage door, it was already open. And Lydia was there. Different. Paler. Skinnier. Her robe hung off her like memory that no longer fit. You're not crazy, she said. No preamble. No small talk. Just raw truth. I know, I replied. They're laundering belief, she said. Turning pain into influence. Every healed soul is just another signal booster for Elias' empire. I nodded, showed her the drive. She exhaled, almost smiled. You got further than I did. She explained how she'd started noticing the gaps, too. How she tried to expose it and was sent to recalibration. A deprivation pod in the hull of the ship, no light, no food, just constant audio programming and temperature shifts designed to break the psyche. She escaped when a new recruit accidentally opened the wrong access panel. She'd been hiding since. They think I drowned, she whispered. Let them. We agreed on a plan. Get the drive off the ship. Lydia knew of a communications technician, Dorian, working with the crew, who had quietly started sabotaging the ship's signal jammers. If we could reach him, we could bounce the data off the maritime network before docking. Time was short. Eyes were everywhere. And the circle wasn't just monitoring movement anymore. They were monitoring thought. Later that night, back in my suite, I found a single sentence etched into the condensation on the mirror. You're already under review. I wiped it with my hand, but I couldn't erase what I now knew. The facade had cracked. And the only thing more dangerous than a lie is the truth that threatens it. Reality fractured the night I lost time. It started with music. A low drone playing through my cabin speakers at 3:13 a.m. No melody, no voice. Just vibration. A hum I felt behind my eyes. When I tried to turn it off, the panel controls froze. The screen blinked twice. Then nothing. I woke up 7 hours later, fully clothed, kneeling in front of my mirror. There was a phrase written across the glass in lipstick I didn't remember owning. You aren't supposed to remember this. My knuckles were red and raw, like I'd been gripping something for hours. The red string around my wrist was gone. In its place, a faint indentation, as if it had been burned off. And that's when I saw it. A small, half-tucked memory card jammed into the edge of my laptop. No label. Inserted upside down. Hidden. I ejected it. Hands shaking. Inside, audio clips. 22 files, all named in dates and codes. I played the first one. Female voice, dazed, distorted, clearly me. If I forget again, remind me, this isn't a cruise. This is containment. They're encoding memory. Sound is the key. Elias isn't leading. He's recording us. This whole ship is a test, no. A lab. No one leaves aligned. We leave overwritten. My own voice. From a moment I had no memory of speaking. Clip after clip revealed a second self. A version of me who had woken up before, and recorded these fragments as insurance. To warn future me. To warn this me. Some were manic. Some sobbing. Some disjointed, like language was breaking apart under pressure. But they all had the same message. If you're listening, it means you're slipping. Don't trust your reflection. Don't follow the lights. And whatever you do, don't listen to the voice in the water. I dropped the headphones. Heart jackhammering. Skin cold. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was proof. Proof that déjà vu wasn't some mystical glitch. It was a symptom. A neurological hiccup caused by looped experience. I wasn't reliving moments. I was being reprogrammed through them. The same conversations. The same phrases. The same touches. Repeating. Refining. Reinforcing. And every time I forgot, I was reset, pushed back into emotional compliance by audio loops, erotic reinforcement, and group validation. It wasn't memory loss. It was consent erasure. That night, I met Lydia in the engine hall. Dorian had finally bypassed the internal jammer. We had one shot to transmit the data to the outside world via a signal burst from the auxiliary NAV array. But something was wrong. Lydia stood near the metal panel, eyes wide. Frozen. They found me, she whispered. Before I could speak, the hallway lights dimmed to blood red. Elias' voice echoed through the chamber. Not live. Pre-recorded. You've reached the edge of clarity. You're seeing the fracture line. This is your final invitation back to alignment. Then silence. Then her voice. Mine. From the speaker. You don't need to be saved. You need to be silenced. We ran. Didn't look back. Dorian met us near the freight lift. Eyes panicked. Hands trembling over a crude satellite uplink he'd built from salvaged parts. We handed him the drive. He nodded. Once I hit this, everything you've recorded goes straight to the dead drop nodes. They'll intercept. They'll know. Do it, I said. And then run. He pressed it. Light pulsed blue. Then green. Data was free. But so was something else. A tremor rolled through the ship. Not mechanical, emotional. The kind of shift you feel when a curtain drops and the stage goes dark. The circle would know. They would all know. We separated. Lydia vanished into the cargo hold. Dorian into maintenance tunnels. I returned to my suite, knowing they'd be watching. And sure enough, there Elias was. Waiting. On my bed. Candle lit. You look divided, he said. I didn't speak. But that's good. Division is clarity cracking open. You drugged me, I said. No, he replied. You chose to forget. We just made it easier. He stood. Walked toward me. You could have stayed innocent. We could have kept you radiant. But now you're fractured. He reached for my hand. I slapped him across the face. He laughed. Still beautiful, he whispered. Even when breaking. I locked the door behind him when he left. Sat in the dark for hours. No music. No mantra. No reflection. Only breath. Only me. Whoever that was. And just before sunrise, the mirror flickered. Not the lights. The glass itself. I watched my reflection blink before I did. Once. Twice. Then leaned forward, lips forming words I couldn't hear. So I leaned closer too. It whispered. This is your real life now. There's a special kind of silence that follows betrayal. It's not quiet, it presses. Like a vacuum behind your eardrums. Like the world has exhaled and forgotten to breathe you back in. That's what the ship felt like after the signal burst. Still. Too still. No alarms. No security takedown. Just stillness. The kind that says, we're not angry. We're disappointed. And now we're going to unmake you. Within 12 hours, my entire world on the Astra Lucent dissolved. My access codes were revoked. My suite was reassigned. My name, my real one, was scrubbed from the group's inner logs. But the punishment wasn't exile. It was visibility. They made me walk among the others, stripped of the red string, stripped of the flow badge, stripped of identity, but kept in place, like a cautionary tale sewn into the seams of their utopia. And no one spoke to me. Not even Jaden. Not even the girl who cried during alignment last week and swore she saw me in her dream before we ever met. They all looked through me now. Even the AI coffee kiosk refused to scan my palm. Groupthink has a scent. And now I reeked of defiance. Lydia was gone. Again. Dorian's signal uplink had been ripped from its panel. When I returned to our hidden storage site, I found only static playing from a shredded headset. No sign of her. No sign of him. Just me. My isolation wasn't physical. It was psychological warfare. My room was moved to the crew's lowest deck. No windows. No mirror. No datapad. No contact. And yet, every night, at exactly 2 a.m., the overhead speaker clicked once. A tiny breath of sound, like someone somewhere still remembered I existed. And each morning, my room was exactly 1 degree colder. Not enough to be noticeable, unless you were counting. And I was. But here's the thing about isolation. It forces clarity. Stripped of voices, stripped of roles, stripped of Elias. I began to feel something unfamiliar in my bones. Myself. The part of me that had existed before I wrapped my trauma in spiritual armor. Before I traded my agency for alignment. Before I mistook erotic dominance for intimacy. I began journaling on the wall using charcoal from the emergency vent seal. Fragments. Memories. Symbols. Truths I didn't want to forget again. His kiss was the lie. The reflection was the proof. You are not programmable. You are the glitch they can't contain. By day 4, the wall was full. By day 5, I found a note under my cot. They erased Dorian. But they didn't stop the burst. It worked. They're looking for you. Hold. No signature. Just ink. Just hope. That night, I left my room and wandered the maintenance tunnels. No plan. Just instinct. That's when I heard it. Low. Steady. Familiar. Not a mantra. A heartbeat. Mine? No. It pulsed through the metal floor. I followed it. Down. Through deck grates. Past the old communications relays. Until I found the server room. Dark. Humid. Alive with whispering machines. In the center, the core. A black tower of glowing interfaces and pulsing wires. This was where Elias' empire lived. The data. The alignments. The scripts. The voice manipulation software. It was all there. And I realized, this wasn't just a cult. It was a content factory. Every breakthrough, every awakening, every orgasmic sob of clarity had been recorded, processed, and sold, packaged into podcasts, meditations, e-courses, marketed to the masses as ethical leadership and awakened living. And my voice was in there too. I reached for the emergency shutoff, but the screen flickered. Elias' face appeared, pre-recorded again. If you're watching this, you've already made the choice. You don't want truth. You want revenge. And revenge, my dear, is just unresolved love in armor. Then static. Then a slow scroll of my name. Over. And over. And over. I backed away. I couldn't end it here. Not yet. I needed the world to see it. I needed a stage. And that meant survival. So I returned to the surface. Played the part. Ate the food. Smiled when I had to. But now, I watched everything with new eyes. Every phrase was code. Every touch a tactic. Every welcome home was a warning. And in the quiet, I whispered back. You don't own my mind anymore. Every story of manipulation has a moment when the target stops being silent. When obedience burns itself out. When survival stops looking like submission. And starts looking like war. Mine began with a mistake. A simple one. I smiled. Not fake. Not sarcastic. A real smile, small, instinctive, at a child chasing a balloon across the upper deck. The balloon bounced toward me. I caught it. Handed it back. It lasted 3 seconds. But someone saw. By sunset, I was summoned. Not by Elias. By the triad. I hadn't seen them in weeks. They weren't figureheads like Elias, more like the shareholders of reality. They rarely spoke. When they did, the room shifted. The meeting was held in the Quantum Lounge, a room so absurdly named it felt like satire. Glass walls. Geometric lighting. No shadows. And 3 chairs occupied. I stood. They didn't offer me a seat. The center one, a woman with ice-white hair and a voice that didn't blink, spoke first. You smiled today. It wasn't a question. Yes, I said. Why? Because I forgot for a second that I'm being rewritten. A pause. Then the left one leaned in, male, skin like weathered stone. We gave you freedom, alignment, a voice, and you used it to scream fire into a sleeping world. I said nothing. The right one stood. Younger, colder. You've become a liability. And then, Elias still believes you're redeemable. I laughed. That was my real mistake. Because the next moment, I was on the floor. Slapped so hard my vision cracked sideways. Not by a hand, by a shock. Hidden in the floor panel under my feet. Triggered remotely. They didn't restrain me. Didn't yell. Just let the pain say what they didn't. When I woke, I was in a new room. Bare metal walls. 2 lights. 1 speaker. No door. The voice came hours later. Elias. Soft. Intimate. Disgusting. Pain returns you to the body. And once you're back in the body, you're easier to lead. He told me I had a choice. Come back. We'll wipe this clean. No punishment. No exile. We'll call this a spiral. A deviation. And if I say no, then we extract everything you know. And rebuild you from zero. I didn't answer. So they started the next phase. Isolation wasn't enough anymore. Now they came for my body. They called it consensual reclamation. A final chance to surrender. Twice a day I was brought into a chamber. Blinding lights. Warm voices. Hands that were soft until they weren't. They didn't touch sexually. That wasn't the point. The point was to invade proximity. To erase space. To dissolve the boundary between self and system. I endured it. Until day 4. Then I broke. Not the way they expected. Not into obedience. Into rage. The next morning, when the white-robed handler came for me, I didn't wait. As soon as the door opened, I drove my elbow into his throat, grabbed the flash drive from my boot, hidden since the signal burst, and slammed it into the side of his temple. He dropped. I ran. Through emergency corridors. Up metal ladders. Alarms didn't sound. They wanted me to run. To see where I'd go. To test whether I still believed in freedom. But this wasn't escape. This was assault. I found Elias in the solarium. Of course I did. Always theatrics with him. Sitting among orchids. Sipping some godless herbal thing. Wearing a robe like a prophet waiting for judgment. He didn't stand. There's still a place for you, he said. There never was, I replied. You don't understand. This isn't manipulation. This is mitigation. I laughed. Choked. Laughed again. You drugged me. You erased me. You fed my trauma into an algorithm and turned it into a product. He blinked. Just once. And it worked. I lunged. Not to hurt. To mark. I slammed the flash drive against his chest. Blood drew from the corner of his lip. You're not a prophet, I whispered. You're a pirate. And I just sunk your ship. I walked out. Didn't run. The cameras followed me. The eyes behind them watched. The circle was no longer amused. Back in my quarters, I found one final note, under the pillow. The port is in 36 hours. Your name is clean. A signal waits in Havana. You were always the anomaly. Let them fear you now. No name. Just a fingerprint. Lydia's. I curled up on the bed. Not to rest. To feel. Everything. All the rage. All the betrayal. All the strength I was never supposed to find. Because here's the thing. They taught me how to surrender. And in doing so, they taught me how to fight. I once thought escaping the ship would be the end of it. But now I understood. The ship wasn't the prison. It was the gateway. The real prison was everywhere their voice reached. The circle's influence didn't end at sea. It dripped across continents, through podcasts, retreats, ethical marketing seminars, corporate therapy apps, even leadership webinars hosted by former members in the public eye. Each one was seeded with triggers. Each one was an echo of the manipulation model they built on the Astralucent. And I had the key. Lydia was right. In Havana, a contact met me at the port. No name, just a leather satchel and a phrase. The mirror never blinks. Inside the satchel, a signal rig, 2 burner phones, and a list, names, aliases, bank accounts, terminal nodes, from Dorian's last backup. The drive I hid had made it out, but barely. I moved like a ghost, never staying in one place longer than a night. I uploaded data fragments from cafes, public libraries, rooftop signals. Every upload was another stitch ripped from their power. This wasn't revenge. It was deconstruction. Each time I leaked a name or an asset, someone inside their system collapsed. A retreat canceled. A thought leader went dark. A crypto account frozen under IRS scrutiny. Whispers started across Reddit, niche forums, anonymous TikTok confessionals. Did anyone else notice these New Age mentors all sound the same? Why do their meditations include weird audio loops? I dated a guy in this leadership circle, and he knew things I never told him. The threads were unraveling, and I was pulling them, but the circle fought back. Silently. They sent bots to flood message boards. They flagged my uploads as misinformation. They used old audio of me, my voice manipulated, to discredit my story. She's unstable. She hallucinated. She asked for the treatment. They painted me as a malfunction. But I didn't need validation. I needed one final breach. I returned to the one place they would never expect me to go. Lisbon, the site of their first offshore server. The birth of the Circle's signal ecosystem. Tucked beneath a yoga retreat. Masquerading as a digital wellness foundation. Protected by layers of pseudoscientific encryption. I booked a class. Smiled through a chakra realignment session. And at 3 a.m., I slipped into the server room beneath the studio's infinity pool. I plugged in the rig. Triggered a mirror backflow attack. A looped code injection Lydia had once scribbled on a napkin in the cargo hold. And as the lines of code danced across the screen, the Circle's central system shuddered. Files unlocked. Logs leaked. Thousands of hours of resonance sessions, all timestamped, all monetized, went live to the world. The VoiceSprint database, the erotic influence indexes, the donor fraud charts. Everything. It only took 14 minutes. Then the lights blinked. The screen darkened. And Elias' voice, again, echoed from the machine. You never escaped. You just changed your role. So did you, I whispered. And I wiped the drive clean. By dawn, the news had broken. Whistleblower reports. Anonymous dump sites. Investigative journalists who had once called me delusional now slid into my DMs. I didn't respond. This was never about me. It was about dismantling the illusion. Back in Jamaica, I watched the world catch fire from a hillside villa. Wind in my hair. Silence in my bones. The Circle was hemorrhaging. Their empire had been built on silence. And now, everyone was talking. One night, I received a final package. No return address. Inside, a red string bracelet. And a note. Alignment was never the goal. Only awakening. You did both. They tried to rewrite me. But I learned to write back. And in doing so, I didn't just survive their system. I unmade it. Freedom is quiet. Not the kind that screams in headlines or sings in anthems. The real kind is still. Subtle. It lives in the way you walk differently after surviving something designed to erase you. It had been 2 months since I leaked the system. The Circle had crumbled, not all at once, but like a cliff face worn by truth. Podcasts deleted. Retreats dissolved. High-level facilitators were summoned to court under their real names. Private jet records cross-checked with shell donations. The language they'd crafted, alignment, resonance, surrender mechanics, was now studied like a virus. And me, I became a shadow inside my own life, watching from the edges, not hiding, just observing. Because when you've lived through curated reality, you spend the rest of your life triple-checking your own reflection. The world wanted interviews, book deals, TV dramatizations. I refused them all, because some stories aren't meant to be sold. They're meant to haunt. And I had one final haunting to do. I returned to the Astra Lucent. It had been docked, abandoned in legal limbo, a ghost ship floating in silence off the coast of Marseille. I chartered a boat, bribed a worker, and boarded her. Not to relive, to reclaim. The ship was still immaculate, like nothing had happened, like it hadn't been the stage for psychological theater. I walked the halls barefoot, touched the polished rails, stared into the portholes where my mind once cracked and whispered, "Not today." In the server room, the core still pulsed, dim and dormant. I placed a small brass box on top of it. Inside, a drive, encrypted with one thing. My full story. Audio. Journals. Evidence. Not for me. Not for them. But for the one who might board this ship 10 years from now. Broken, searching, vulnerable. And who deserves to know. You're not crazy. You were targeted. And you are not alone. I lit a match. Dropped it on the carpet. Not out of vengeance. Out of ritual. The Circle didn't deserve a graceful death. They deserved cleansing. And as I stepped back into the ocean night and watched the fire rise, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt returned. To myself. To my instincts. To the one they tried to rewrite, but never could. Back on land, I wrote one thing across the wall of the Havana safe house before leaving it forever. Trauma didn't define me, but it decoded them. So what now? Now I live quietly. Near water. Far from systems. I teach breathwork to small groups, not for profit, not for power, just for people learning to be human again. People like me. I wear no bracelet, but I keep the red string folded inside a book on my shelf. A reminder, not of Elias, not of the circle, but of what I survived, and who I became in the fire. Because in the end, the greatest form of resistance isn't exposure. It's healing in public. It's staying alive when you were supposed to vanish. It's whispering back to the systems that tried to consume you. I was the glitch, and I broke your code.